Yo, what is going on, guys? Got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you guys today. Today we're going to go over the entire season pass, the super premium season pass, and see if you guys should spend your precious resources, whether that is buying the upgraded, of course, super premium season pass, or maybe even just spending $6K separately just to get Adamantium Infusion. Either way, we're going to be talking about the good and the bad for each card, some key synergies, key counters, 2 different decks for each card, as well as the floor and the ceiling. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, the Adamantium Season Pass card is going to be Weapon X, which does have the 2-cost, 2-power stat line, and the Adamantium ability from Snap.Fan and from Marvel Snap Zone. I kind of reference both of those together, is going to be after one of your other cards is destroyed, +1 power. After each third time, or every third time, improve this by +1. So when you get to 3 destroys, then it will go from being +1 to +2 for each destroy. And then once you've gotten to 6 total destroys, it'll go from +2 to +3. Of course, that is a lot of destroys in-game, but it does give you a large variety of different options here. And I think that's very interesting. It's like a newer kind of style of destroy, in the sense of this is a collector kind of destroy card, and this does need to be on the board in order to get that extra power, since it is not an ongoing ability. Whereas the next card we have is going to be Adamantium Infusion, which is the super premium Datamine Season Pass card, or you can get this as a Series 5 card from the seasonal Snap packs as well for the Series 5 cards, which this card is a 4-cost skill with the ability, on reveal, revive your highest powered destroyed card here with its power doubled. So this is a targeted revive, looking at the card that has the most power in your destroy pile or in your graveyard, and it gets revived at that location. Kind of think of how like something like Elixir targets a card from last round, and Phoenix Force targets any card in your destroy pile. Firelord, any discarded or destroyed card gets revived by a Firelord. Any 3-cost destroyed or discarded card. Or in Morgan the Fae, any destroyed or discarded card. But this is a targeted to the card that has the most power in your destroy pile gets revived by Adamantium Infusion. Next, as we look at some of these key synergies for Weapon X, the first one I want to note is Squirrel Girl. Something like a destroy zoo deck, allowing you to be able to destroy more than just like 1 or 2 cards a turn, potentially. Of course, with something like a Killmonger to be able to nuke Squirrel Girl cards, or even Shanna cards, that would be potentially 6 destroys there. So you would get that +3 from the first 3 destroys, and then you would get an additional +6. So that would be a Killmonger into Squirrel Girl after a Shanna kind of situation. Could get you potentially 9 power onto your Weapon X, which I think 211 seems pretty decent. And you're destroying so many cards, why would you not run Death, right? Since you're destroying so many, getting your Death cheaper, so you can have that as kind of like an alternate kind of line to be able to have as your win con kind of situation there for some Weapon X value, and also for just other cards you can slam down on the board. Next, of course, we're going to be talking about the counters, which, Red Guardian hitting your Weapon X, it only has 2 power at base, so it is going to be kind of on the lower side there, so it's an easier target for Red Guardian. Same as Deafening Chord, which you're seeing probably more Deafening Chord than you are Red Guardian at the moment. Deafening Chord targeting cards that cost 3 or less. If you don't have this in another lane with 1-cost cards, your Deafening Chord or their Deafening Chord is going to nuke potentially your Weapon X. Next, of course, we do have Shadow King. You can scale this card as much as possible. It is not ongoing power, so it can be Shadow Kinged because it is just gained power. So unfortunately, that would be another immediate counter for Weapon X. As we move on to some of the key synergies for Adamantium Infusion, I want to note, goodness gracious, Kid Omega is one of those great cards because Kid Omega, of course, makes it so when you do destroy a card, you still maintain that card's power onto Kid Omega. It gets transferred over. And you could do something like you played Kid Omega a turn prior because it's an activate. And you could destroy a card with Kid Omega and then Adamantium Infusion potentially at the same turn, depending on what you destroyed. Or if it is just setting up something like a Nimrod, you Shuri Nimrod into Adamantium Infusion, so that Nimrod that got destroyed last turn was at 12 power from Shuri, and then you Adamantium Infusion, and then it is a 24 powered Nimrod. Because the card does double when it is revived with Adamantium Infusion, so you can set up some crazy plays there. You also can potentially, set this up with some of these cards later in the season, like Fastball Special with Adamantium Infusion is something you could probably play same turn simultaneously. There's a lot of just really interesting stuff I think you can do with this. And then, of course, Fire Hair. Anything like a zombie kind of destroy deck, which is something, Jet's been running, which we'll have one of those actually in today's video. Spoiler alert. And I've been having a lot of fun with that deck too. Something like Fire Hair, just getting a Zombie Giant Man destroyed, and then you have Adamantium Infusion, which targets the Zombie Giant Man that got destroyed. Because more often than not, that'd probably be the bigger card, unless it's like a Cassandra Nova. Because then also Cassandra Nova would get destroyed and then revived with double or power, and then the Honor Reveal should go off again. Because almost all of these cards, when they are revived, are going to be able to proc their Honor Reveals. Like it feels like that happens every single time, whether that is Phoenix Force, whether that is Zola, because Zola gives a copy of a new card and it comes back revived. Even something like an Elixir, something like a Fire Lord, it just makes sense for that to continue to happen. So Fire Hair is just another good shout to be able to get that Honor Reveal to go off again, and then you're not really missing out on power because when the card gets brought back with Adamantium Infusion, it is doubled in power. Next, though, looking at some of these counters, of course, we're going to have Stardust. Stardust is in a main counter because this is a revive card. If Stardust is on the board, your Adamantium Infusion will play itself, and then nothing will happen because the only way you can get Stardust or work with Stardust is cards can only be added to the board if they are moving or if they are played. So it does not give you any token value itself. So it kind of completely negates what you're trying to do with Adamantium Infusion. Of course, Shadow King, the card you revive, does not have that power as an ongoing power. Shadow King can reset it to base power. And then, of course, Shang-Chi, because the card is doubled in power. It might be over 10 power, so Shang-Chi can just nuke that. Of course, Cosmo is another way to offset your Adamantium Infusion, too, because Cosmo makes it so Honor Reveals don't happen, so just kind of keep that in mind as well. As we move on to the good, we're going to talk about the good for Weapon X here. Of course, it is a potential new scaler for Destroy. Something you can kind of like let in a lane, let it do its own thing. You don't got to worry about it unless, Red Guardian, Deafening Chord and stuff. So maybe you want to have maybe a card there or something, but you can kind of leave it alone, let it do its own thing. You just don't destroy cards in lane, which kind of also can be a little interesting. It can really snowball. If you get a lot of destroys, this card with that +1 into a +2 into a +3, like there's a lot of really cool ways to get this card to get a lot of value. I mean, more often than not, like 2-5 would be pretty good with that plus, destroying 3 cards, but like 2-11 is really good. 220 is absolutely insane if you can get that many destroys in a game, but of course it counts your cards. Then, it gains power every single time a card is on the board and gets destroyed, and it's one of your cards. It's not your opponent's cards. It is whenever one of your cards gets destroyed, it gains power. So just kind of keep that in mind, and the card does have to be on the board. And then, yeah, it's a 2-cost. It's pretty easy to play out. You can play it out on curve, potentially in that style of destroy. Which is why when we do look at the bad for this card, it has to be on the board to gain power because it's not ongoing. It does have to be in play in order to be able to get that extra power. Kind of like Collector, you're not going to just get Collector back on the board after you've already, discarded Swarms or you've added cards to your hand and Collector gets that power immediately. Like, this has to be in play in order to get that additional power. And then it could be a tempo loss because if you're playing it in something like a classic Destroy, you have the Deadpool. You're trying to buff Deadpool up with X23, destroy as many cards as possible. You're focusing more on a null, more on a death. Like, it feels like this may be just like a tempo loss in that sense because you're not really ramping up to the big stuff you want to do later in the game. You're not setting up an Agony onto Deadpool turn 2. You're playing Weapon X on turn 2. Of course, it kind of just depends on what's in your hand and your card draw there, but it feels like it probably a potential just tempo loss, like I'm saying. And, like, does it fit in Standard Destroy? Or does this make a new style of Destroy? Is this going to be more of a mid-range style Destroy? Are you doing Moira things? Like, are you doing, like, not Deadpool things? Are you doing the Destroy Zoo to be able to get also, like, that extra death value kind of things, too? Like, what exactly are you playing this in? And as a late draw, you have to destroy cards on final turn in order to get any value from this, or this is just a stagnant 2-2. That you're like, well, I drew the worst card I possibly could draw. I can't do anything with this. So it feels like a really, really bad late draw, unfortunately. Which for a Season Pass card, you'd want it to be able to give you that extra value no matter when you draw it. But kind of feels a little bad on the late end. Next, as we talk about Adamantium Infusion, it is a targeted revive. So it always looks in your destroy pile for the highest powered destroyed card. So that is really solid, opposed to having to fish potentially would, like something with a Phoenix Force, or if multiple cards were destroyed on the last turn with something like an Elixir. And it doubles the card that it revives. That seems really good if you're asking me. Being able to double that card's value is kind of crazy, which I think will be very interesting, I think, for this card itself, to see what type of homes it really fits into. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And then, yeah, I think it's flexible. It's not just in regular destroy. I think you could use this in your Nimrod destroy, of course. I think into the zombie deck, I think you could swap out potentially Phoenix Force for this, because you're then doubling the card's power, and you know exactly the card you're reviving here with Adamantium Infusion, which is really nice. Excuse me. And then I also liked Guest's idea. Guest's idea, potentially, you could, destroy a red skull with something like your whatchamacallit. You could destroy your red skull with something like a Kid Omega, or maybe you have extra energy, so you destroy your red skull, and then with like a Venom, and then you can Adamantium Infusion onto another lane, so then you get a 56 powered red skull. Oh no, my opponent's guards get +2, but I have a 56 powered red skull on the board. So I think that's something that could be funny or just interesting to kind of mess around with there. And then that's a skill, so it doesn't take up board space. Of course, you have to have board space for the card that gets revived as well. Kind of thinking of it like a Ghost Rider, in that sense, I do believe. I think it would take up the next board space, opposed to being directly where Adamantium Infusion was. Of course, we'll have to wait and see in the dev video how that actually works, but that's kind of what I'm inferring there. It's kind of something more like having to have the extra board space like a Ghost Rider, unless maybe it is like a Phoenix Force. If it is like a Phoenix Force, that makes this card even better too. You don't have to have 2 board spaces in order for that to happen, which could also make sense too. It'd be more like the Phoenix Force. So that's kind of like my thought process there. If it is more like a Phoenix Force, my stocks go even higher up for this card. But even if it is something like a Ghost Rider, I think that still is really solid for this here. And then as we do talk about the bad for this card, you do have to have a card destroyed in order for the skill to work. If you do not have a card destroyed, the skill does nothing. It also is an on reveal, since it's not ongoing power that the power is doubled. Shadow King does completely obliterate this and put this back at its base power for the card that you do revive. And then, it is a revived card that your opponents know about. They can check your grave pool, your graveyard, to see what card was destroyed, so they can kind of see if you have Adamantium Infusion, what card you're bringing back. Of course, they don't know necessarily where you're bringing it back on that turn, but if they're just proactive enough and can check your graveyard, they have a general idea of what cards could be revived. And then, it is a 4-cost card, so 4 costs are kind of expensive. So just kind of keeping that in mind when it comes to this is, it is a turn 4 or like turn 5 play, potentially turn 6, but it does take up a lot of your resources to play it out. As we move along here, we're going to be talking about the floor and the ceiling for Weapon X. I think on the floor for this card, it is a bad late draw, or if you're unable to destroy any cards on the board, it is just going to be a 2-2. Pretty rough. But I think on average, you'll be able to destroy 2 to potentially 4 cards in one game, which would make this a 2-2, +2 if you destroy 2 cards, so that's a 2-4, +3 if you destroyed 3 cards, 2-5, and +5 if you destroyed 4 cards, because it gets that extra +1 after you destroy a card over 3, or destroy over 3 cards. So that would make this card essentially a 2-7. And 2-7 is pretty good stats there. Next, I do think on the absolute top end, you have the craziest freaking game ever for Weapon X. You destroy 5 or more cards. It goes from a 2-2 to a 2-9, then to a 2-11, then to a 2-12 if you destroyed 7 cards, 2-15 if you destroyed 8 cards, and a 2-20 if you have destroyed 9 cards, which would be absolutely crazy. Next, as we do move on to the floor and ceiling to Adamantium Infusion, I do think the low end of this is you don't have a card you can revive, or the card you do revive just isn't worth spending 4 energy on in order to get that card doubled. It's just not great. But I do think, holy moly. I do think the middle edge for this card, of course, is something you have with just solid power. Something with 5 power getting revived to 10 power, pretty good. Something with 7 going to 14. There's some really solid options, I think, there. just for the base kind of value you could get with this. Now, on the top end, you are reviving your combo card. You're reviving that zombie giant man. You're reviving a huge Cassandra Nova. You're reviving a Nimrod in order to do other things with it, whether that's destroying it again or just to win a lane. I think that gives you some really solid options for this card and would be the peak for this, which I honestly don't think is too hard to achieve. Of course, you have to play into your game plan in order for that to happen, but I think that's more kind of achievable to get this kind of ceiling for this card than for something like that Weapon X. As we do move to our decks over here, I'm starting off with a Morgan Le Fay style deck here for Weapon X, because I feel that you can have a large variety of ways to destroy these cards in order to have this as another just potential scaler on the board, and then you also have Morgan Le Fay to revive them, playing kind of into that zoo line while also getting death value. You have Venom and you have Carnage to be able to destroy cards. Killmonger, Nico Destroy Draw 2 is another option there, just to kind of have just more offset power on the board and get different value-wise in order to either get some Fire Hair value too. So you have Weapon X, you have Fire Hair, so that's kind of like where it gets a little tricky for your turn 2. Which do you play? I think it really depends on what you have on the board. And also, if you do have Fire Hair and you destroy Squirrel Girl, of course your Fire Hair will also summon squirrels, but then if you Venom your Killmonger, Fire Hair will then make Killmonger go off again, which could give you some more Weapon X value. So I feel like there's a lot of different ways you can actually get some crazy value for actually Weapon X in something like this. The next list we have is that classic Destroy list. Of course, no Moira X in this, but I'm running Weapon X instead to see if you can get that value. Destroying Headpool multiple times can give you some value. Of course, Deadpool, X-23 Nico. Destroying maybe even some of those destroy cards, whether that is a Deathlock, whether that is a Carnage. Using Venom to mitigate that, being able to keep some of that power on the board. Just like seeing if this will actually work in something like Classic Destroy is something I do want to test. I don't necessarily think it will, but it is not, the worst thing to maybe just try it out and kind of see what happens, right? Next, we do have the good old Mech Fusion, which is pretty much an older kind of Kid Omega, Black Panther, Zola, Nimrod deck with Adamantium Infusion as one of those cards to be able to get that top end or that high roll. Potentially you Kid Omega that Nimrod in order to, of course, gain that power on Kid Omega. And then next turn, you might be able to Adamantium Infusion and then Carnage on one lane to have a 24-powered Nimrod spread across the board. Or maybe you also want to do that Kid Omega into Black Panther. You have Elixir as another one of those revive options. You also have Zola to be able to do Panther Zola things. Symbiote Spider-Man with a Shuri. Potentially, if you got that with Zabu out, could double your card immediately. And the type of thing where if you have Zabu, Kid Omega, and then you Superior Spider-Man into Shuri, into Nimrod, the Nimrod you're destroying will be a 24-power Nimrod for Kid Omega. Then you Adamantium Infusion that Nimrod, and then it is a 48-powered Nimrod, and then you Carnage that Nimrod. Like, there's just a lot of, crazy stuff. I think you do this. This is still, super greedy, really blending into that Nimrod-style Destroy list, which, of course, can get offset by a different bunch of combo cards. But this is greedy, and your opponents, more often than not, probably won't be able to scale as crazy in power with this deck. So just kind of keeping that in mind. But I do think the deck I really want to test is going to be the newest version of Jet's Zombies deck, which, of course, we made a video on earlier in this season. But using Adamantium Infusion instead of Phoenix Force because it is a targeted revive, I think is really nice. Of course, it takes up 2 board spaces, potentially. Unless it works like Phoenix Force, then it takes up 1 board space. I think that's kind of where my thought process is there. I think it takes more of... I don't know. I think I need to see the dev video in order to fully gauge that, but I think just keeping that in mind, if it does act like more Phoenix Force, even better. If it acts like Ghost Rider, kind of, just playing around that is something you need to think about here, but I think this is where I'm going to go immediately day one. I think this has some really solid options, and I think the zombie deck in general seems really cool. You have, of course, Cassandra Nova as enablers. You have Elixir to be able to revive stuff. You have Adamantium Infusion to revive stuff. Fire Hair to get value from cards that are destroyed. Like, this deck is really solid. It's got a little bit of a learning curve to it when you think about it. You kind of got to play around a bunch of things and really learn the deck. So just kind of keep that in mind. But this is definitely what I'm going to be trying first. And then in general, when I do my rankings for Weapon X, I just don't know. I think this card's got a cool ability, and I think like that's like cool, like it's a new style of destroy. But I just don't know if it's good in the current meta. Like, I wonder if this is something that needs to get better as the season progresses, when there's more styles of destroy cards being added, so you can play this more in that mid-range deck. Or this is just going to fall flat. You just play regular classic destroy instead. This is just not fit in what you really want it to play this in. Because the tempo loss. Like, you have to kind of play this in a destroy deck. You're to be destroying a lot of cards. Like, you need to be destroying a lot of cards in order to get value. Yes, you can destroy 3, go to 2-5. Okay, that's pretty good. But, like, if I'm going to be doing this for tempo, I want to destroy, like, 5 to 9 cards. Because I want to really get this to be a win con. I know 2-5 is a good stat line for a 2 cost. But if like I said, if I'm playing this out on 2 instead of doing an Agony Deadpool or, like, a Deadpool X23... I need to really benefit from this because my game plan has kind of been shifted because I'm playing this out instead. Whereas something like an Adamantium Infusion may not be super flexible, but it'll be more flexible than Weapon X. I think something like this, being able to double a card that you revive, is really good, and most of these revive cards have the on reveal go off again, so like you really should just get tremendous value every time, or just the time you actually play this out, which I think is really beneficial. I think in the Nimrod stuff, in the Fire Hair stuff, even just maybe you're playing this in like a weird kind of Sauron kind of deck like Guest was talking about. I think like that could be really solid for this as well. And I think the doubling is very strong, and it being a targeted revive is very strong. Maybe if it is too good, they adjust it and make it a 5 cost. I don't know about that. Whereas something like the good old Weapon X over here, if it doesn't perform the way they want to, they buff it. They've buffed Season Pass cards here in the past because they haven't performed the way they want to. Think of Zombie Scarlet Witch. Think of Captain Carter. You know, like, there's definitely cards here that could potentially get buffed because they're not getting the right play they want to see. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens for Weapon X. And Adamantium Infusion, if it performs too well, they'll wait till the season's gone and they do something like a Sparky. But just kind of keeping that in mind, which is why when I say Weapon X, so like, I am very, 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 very low on Weapon X. While I think you should always buy the Season Pass because it gives you the most value in the game and is one of the best ways you can get resources, if you were to get this card by itself, I would suggest no. I just feel like on paper, it's not looking like it's going to be performing that well. Of course, with the theory crafting and stuff, I could totally be wrong because this is theory crafting. I don't have hands-on experience with this card. But if I was not buying the Season Pass for all the other reasons, I would suggest not getting this card. I think this card's going to be a bust. Whereas Adamantium Infusion, I think, is going to be incredible. Of course, both these cards, it depends on what you enjoy playing. If you want to play more of the Destroy midrange and you want to test the heck out of, Weapon X, do it because it is your resources. Do what you want to do. But, I'm giving you guys my thoughts. I think Adamantium Infusion is going to be incredible. I think in that Nimrod style, I think in that zombie deck, I think in that potential doing some crazy Red Skull things, or even just some other things with destroying cards in order to get value even later in the season, I think it's going to be really solid with this card. I think this card truly is going to continue to age and perform better and better and better and better. So if you don't even want to buy the super premium Season Pass, just get this for opening a snap pack. Might not be a bad idea. I think, of course, it is 6,000 tokens. And, like, legitimately, at the end of the day, guys, like, your resources are super precious. We don't have a really crazy way to be able to get a large abundance of resources. So kind of keeping that in mind, spend your resources the way you want to spend them, how you guys are really going to enjoy Snap. Because at the end of the day, guys, we're playing a video game. We're playing a video game, and me and my friends that are, making these videos, we're kind of just inferring how these cards are going to perform. We don't know how the meta is truly going to perform until the day of, We have a bunch of cards coming out on day 1 of the season. I think we only have 3 cards this time, potentially 4, depending on how limited time modes and stuff happen per data mines kind of thing, if you guys saw yesterday's video. But I think we got a lot of stuff to test. The meta kind of changes, of course, the week 1 of the new season when there's a large variety of cards and stuff too. And I think we might even have an OTA this week. So I think even like an OTA in mind, the meta could shift. And bad cards do get buffed. So if Weapon X performs bad, maybe they buff it. And good cards do get nerfs. So maybe if Adamantium Infusion is too good, they make it a 5 cost, like there's a bunch of different things that can kind of play into this after the time of us posting like these videos and stuff. So just kind of, keep that in mind. Sometimes we're right about cards, sometimes we're wrong. Like I was wrong about Man Spider. I really enjoyed the card, and that card performed incredibly this past season. But at the end of the day, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, definitely feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. I hope you guys have an absolutely blessed weekend. Be on the lookout for tomorrow's video on Chamber. It's been real. God bless, and Tucker out.